Hello and welcome. We like to record stories about notable pilots, especially Australian pilots. Australia has 110 years of amazing aviation history. In the context of human history, that is but a blip. Yet, in those 110 years, if you explore, you can discover astonishing stories. Today I'm going to tell you just a few that relate to pioneering women in aviation in Australia. Until 1927, it was not possible for an Australian woman to hold a pilot's licence and fly within Australia. Women had participated in gliding or taken a licence overseas, but they had not been permitted to fly a plane under licence within Australia. Florence Taylor was the first Australian woman to fly a plane, a glider built by her husband, George Augustine Taylor, and that was in 1909. Hilda Hope McMaw was a nurse who took a pilot's licence in England in 1919, but she was not allowed to use a licence within Australia. It was pilots such as Amelia Earhart and Amy Johnson who inspired Australian women to take to the air either as a hobby or as a career. On March the 28th, 1927, widow Millicent Bryant became the first Australian woman to gain a private pilot's licence. The first to own her own plane was Bobby Terry, a grazier's wife of Gunnedah in New South Wales. That was in 1929. Bobby was the second Australian woman to earn a commercial pilot's licence. The first Australian woman to receive a commercial pilot's licence was Phyllis Arnott in 1931. Her two brothers had a plane. Perhaps she was a little jealous. They could afford this because they were part of the Arnott's Biscuit empire. Qantas named an A380 aircraft after her. Another woman who came from a wealthy family was Freda Thompson. She received a private pilot's licence in 1929, and in 1932 she gained a commercial pilot's licence and became only the fifth woman in Australia to do so. In 1933, Thompson was the first woman in the British Empire to obtain an instructor's licence, although she never worked as an instructor. In 1934, Thompson sailed for England to pick up her new de Havilland Moth Major plane. She planned to fly solo in the England to Australia air race, but was unable to complete the necessary preparations in time to participate in the race. She was acclaimed as the first Australian woman to fly from England to Australia on the 6th of November 1934. But how can that be? Amy Johnson had achieved worldwide recognition when in 1930 she became the first woman to fly solo from England to Australia. However, Maud Loris Bonney was the first woman to fly solo from Australia to England, that's the reverse direction, in a de Havilland 630G on the 21st of June 1933. Bonney had earlier circumnavigated Australia in 1932 and was the first to fly from Australia to South Africa in 1937 in a Clem L32. Her husband's cousin was Bert Hinkler, who inspired her interest in flying. Then there was Nancy Bird Walton, the youngest woman to obtain a commercial pilot's licence at that time. She founded the Australian Women's Pilots Association and was awarded an OBE in 1978, Order of the British Empire. Qantas named their first Airbus A380 after her. Peggy McKillop-Kelman worked for Nancy in 1935. She became president of the Australian Women's Pilots Association and earned an OBE also. Another OBE went to Gwen Stark. She gained her pilot's licence in 1939 and was appointed to a position in the Australian Women's Auxiliary Air Force. After World War II, Stark travelled to Europe and worked with the Berlin Airlift. Nancy Ellis gained her private pilot's licence in 1942 and her commercial licence in 1946. She earned her instructor rating and worked for Kingsford Smith Aviation. In 1950, Ellis became the first Australian woman to fly a heavy aircraft, that is with a weight over 12,000 pounds. In 1952, she flew to the US and piloted a Lockheed Shooting Star T-33A. This flight earned her the distinction of becoming the first Australian woman to fly a jet aircraft. She was the first Australian woman to work as a chief flying instructor. In August 1927, Evelyn Follett became the third Australian woman to earn a pilot's licence. A tiny woman, she had to sit on the cushion to reach the controls. She went on to set up an airways administration company called Ad Astra with her brother, Captain Follett, and Captain Bunny Hammond. Follett was one of the 5 female pilots who flew in formation with Amy Johnson when she made her landmark arrival into Sydney during her England-Australia flight in 1930. After the death of her husband, May Bradford Shepherd overheard a conversation about aviator Amy Johnson. It inspired her to take flying lessons, and in 1931 she became the only woman in Australia to hold a first-class pilot's A and B licence in addition to an A and B electrical ground engineer's certificate. She completed the Adelaide Centenary Air Race of 1936 along with Nancy Bird, Loris Bonney, Freda Thompson and Ivy Pearce. She flew the plane she had built in the workshops at Mascot, a Clem Eagle. Rather talented lady. These 13 pioneer aviation women have made it easier for other women, breaking down stereotypes and prejudices. Bravo, I say. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.